guess which one is Anton and which one is Irene. Anton and I have been working together now, well, since 2007, so it's 12 years. And in 2014, we started our own studio. So we used to work together at a big agency. And in 2014, both of us had just turned 30. And we had a very big crisis of, what should we do with the rest of our lives? Is that all there is type of thing? So we decided to start our own studio. And focus really on doing design again, because a lot of times when you work in a big agency and you get promoted into a director role, like creative director, you actually don't design at all anymore, and we really did not like that. So we became designers again. So we gave ourselves a demotion when we started our own studio and no longer refer to ourselves as directors. Now we are just designers, and we prefer it that way.
But then you have to understand is that in 2014 we had a very high salary. We were being paid a lot of money. We had assistants. We had a team of people doing stuff for us. We had
clients that were just appearing.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to search for clients because we had a whole team basically bringing us work and putting, this is Ferrari, this is MTV, like this is all the clients, and all we had to do is just basically figure out how to make them. But then when you leave, you have none of that basically. So so when we talk about demotion, it's demotion on all the levels possible basically.
No salary, no clients, no team, no office space. We started again with zero.
No, nothing, yeah.
No. But it worked out fine.
It looks so.
So far so good. No, I think there's a big trend, at least in the US, in design that both of us have noticed, and especially in digital, that it used to be that a client would only want to hire a very big firm, with a lot of people on staff, and because they wouldn't feel comfortable giving a big budget project to a small team. And I think over the years, a lot of the clients realized that they're getting kind of they're paying a lot of money for a lot of people that show up in meetings but don't really do any work because the structure of an agency is so big. So now clients prefer to give projects to smaller teams much more so than the big agencies. So I think we were not conscious of that when we started, but luckily we discovered that over the years, actually you do not need to be a big agency to get big clients. In fact, now big clients prefer to work with smaller studios.
And then answering to your question, saying, I guess it worked out, it depends what you mean by that. Like every single agency measures success differently. And for every American company, the growth is number one. It's like the first thing they want to do is grow. And if they don't have resources or money, they take a lot of loans, they hire a lot of expensive people, and they grow because they think if you grow, then you can make a lot of money, or then you can sell your company somewhere. And for us, both growth and money are not on the priority. I mean, yes, we want to make money because we have to pay rent, essentially. But at the end of the day, we're still a two-people company, and that's something that's not. It used to be not common at all. Now it's more and more common in the US. And to Irene's point is when clients hire a small company, they know it's going to be like a handcrafted service. The people who they're talking to are the people who are going to be doing the work. It's not like a top-level manager shows up on a meeting and there are a bunch of junior designers that are going to execute it somewhere. So clients now prefer that. There are still large corporations who don't like to hire smaller companies. There's a risk, like what if they go bankrupt, what if they dissolve? So they still prefer hiring big agencies that will do absolutely everything for them. But in the past 10 years, the trend is if a company wants a very well 3D, they go to a very tiny company that only does 3D. They want sound design, they go to a very small company that only does sound design. If they want interaction design, they come to us. So they don't want to come to one big corporation hoping that they're going to do amazing job at everything, basically.
Even, we have an Austrian client, Zoom Tobel.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah, and I think probably 10 years ago they would not have considered hiring a studio of our size, but now they have. So it's also, even on the European scale, I think it's changing a lot too.
I think it's this not exactly the same. Here it's a bit different. A lot of big agencies hire small specialized firms to do, for example, the sound design. but they are still doing the full service agency thing. That's very common.
So we don't work for agencies. That's something that for us, there's no, if we don't have a direct line to the client, we don't want to get the filtered down version of whatever the client thinks.
Yes. I get that. That's a thing a lot of companies, from the creative industries are struggling with. That like you always like just the fifth wheel. You always have to like travel behind the agency, whatever they are doing. You never get like direct contact to the client. That can be difficult sometimes. But you said you do everything alone. I thought that sometimes you don't just do design, you also do like film movies or the documentary or so. And one big emphasis of Forward is to put corporations like in the focus. We really want to like engage people at the festival and bring them together. That like people from different fields start to work together. We want to like function as a platform. So my question would be like how corporations work for you as a two-man team working with others, how you approach these things.
So I think for us the main differences, I guess, is look, every project we do, we work with people. The difference is they're not our employees. They're people that we hire on a per project basis to help us with specialized skills that we ourselves don't possess. So for example, we are not programmers, we are not developers, but every project requires programming and development. We are not illustrators, we are not 3D artists, we are not sound designers. So every time we need these kind of things, we hire a specialized team to help us with that. So, which is great because it allows us to have a much wider output of types of design projects. Because we don't have to worry about, we have a sound designer on staff, we need to find a project for him, he needs to get a client billable project to work on, so now we really have to find sound work, So we strip all of that away, when now we're left with, what project do we want to do? And ideally it's something that we haven't done before and something very different, and then we try to assemble the team around it to make the project happen. And then when that project is done, maybe 4 or 5 projects later, we hire people from that same team. So we have a very big network of also small 2 people, 3 people companies that we partner with, but not as permanent employees, because then we would be stuck with having to find more work like that constantly.
As everybody knows, working together can be difficult sometimes, like meeting new people, getting in the same workflow. What are the things you're looking for when you're working together with people, with other creatives? What are like main points you feel comfortable with?
To be honest, actually, one of the things is that whether we worked with them before. That's like one of the things. It also depends on the project, and there are a lot of things when you work with clients and you have actual big projects. You are not really allowed to fail a lot. That's what a lot of people tell you, like fail fast, fail a lot. Like no, you're gonna get fired if you fail a lot and fail fast. So you need to be a little bit mindful of having a percentage of experimental work with clients and a certain percentage where you bring your expertise and you know what you're doing. So when we work with clients, we prefer to hire people that we worked in the past. They also know how we work, we know how they work, we don't have to spend time ironing a lot of details, like we know what we're doing, and then we can maybe afford some level of experimentation. When it comes to personal projects, which we do a lot, we actually tend to hire people that we've never even worked in the past, because we have no idea what we're doing, but in reality we are not afraid of failing because we don't have client above us, and our goal here is to be as experimental and as risky as possible and just see what the outcome will be. But when it comes to clients' project, you just have to be a little bit more mindful, because clients won't hire you if you're known for failing a lot and failing fast.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the guy who's going to be here tomorrow, Eric Kessels, he's a big fighter for the failure, if you can say it like that.
But I mean, Eric also...
he doesn't fail very often.
In
his...
exactly. I think Eric also comes from a position of privilege.
He has a name. Like
And but people hire him, they know what to expect. Right?
You just have to be careful with having a name and teaching 16-year-old designers this thing. It's like it takes some time. So you have to earn a name and earn the trust, where people then trust. Even if you fail, you're going to come up with a result.
Yeah, basically the first 10 years of your career, you cannot fail. And then, once you've proven yourself, you can start to fail.
I'm gonna tell Eric that tomorrow and then see how he responds. You answered it in a way, so we're gonna just go in a bit of different direction, because like you both have like an agency background, come from that, afterwards you decided, okay, that can't be everything, we go self-employed. Today the trend seems to be a bit different, at least as I see it. There are a lot of young people right after university or whatever they're doing, go self-employed first and figure out things like that. One question would be, sorry, I have a note here. One question would be if you regret like how you did it, like working in an agency before and then going self-employed, and the other one would be if you think that's some kind of parameter change that's transforming like the whole creative industry right now.
Okay, I have a simple answer to that actually. The number one thing you need to be a successful designer is not talent, it's a network. It's the most important thing, because the only way you get work is if you know people who are giving work. Otherwise, who the hell are you to ask for work? You're not going to call some random company and say, hey, I have a studio, do you need some work? So we teach at a school in Barcelona, and there are master's students, and a lot of them ask us this question: should we just start our own company right away? And I always give them the same advice. I said, listen, you can do whatever you want, it's your life, but you're much better off if for the first 2 years of your career, you surround yourself with as many people as possible that are in the industry. And the best way to do that is to work for a company whose work you admire. Because if you, like for me and Anton, for example, 95% of our clients are former clients from our previous life in an agency, or even former employees who we worked with before who now work somewhere else. So the most important thing in getting work is not having a great portfolio or being a talented designer, it's having a network of people who know who you are and know what you can do. So if you start out of school and you don't have a network at all, and you just have a website and you say, I'm open for business, well, good luck with that. It's going to be very, very difficult to get work that, will be good enough that you will want to do. So most successful designers I know, all in one form or another, started with working for somebody else. Also because that's how you learn about the business, that's how you learn about the business of design, which is also very important into maintaining your own sanity. And then once they feel like, they have their sea legs, then they start off and start their own companies. I don't know very many people who started their own company from scratch and became successful. I think it's harder, and I think it's possible, but it's very, very difficult. So
I think that besides the network, there are a lot of things you learn at the company. It's like you actually learn to work with other people. You're forced to work with other people whether you like them or not, because they're being hired by the company. There are going to be conflicts, there are going to be certain things where you guys don't like each other, but it's almost like for kids has to go to kindergarten to become social in their life, and it's a similar thing. If you start freelancing right after college, you might not know how to talk to people properly, even in terms of work related. How to give feedback, how to receive feedback, understand who is responsible for what, just to learn how contracts are being signed, just to learn how budgets are being calculated. I think those are the best things to learn at the agency. You might not agree with that, but at least you have a basis and you know what not to do, or for example, what to do. And I don't really understand how you can do that without going through an agency or a company or some kind of work environment lifestyle for at least a year or two.
It's like the old days, right? When you were like in the Middle Ages, a child would be 12 years old, he would be given to the blacksmith, to have an apprenticeship, and then 4 years later the child became a blacksmith, and I think that level of apprenticeship is very, very important in design, because again, design is not just design, it's everything else that actually has nothing to do with sitting behind a computer or making things with your hands.
Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? If not, I have plenty more.
What is your favorite tool to design?
My hands. I mean, I think tools are a pen, you know. I think the computer is my least favorite, actually. I think once we get to the computer, it becomes execution, production, which is important, but it's not my favorite part of the job. I hate sitting behind a computer all day. It's my least favorite part of being a designer. So thinking, sketching, coming up with things, and then, you know, having the idea is my favorite part of the job. So yeah, my hands and my brain, those are my favorite tools.
I mean the same. I mean my camera. My brain, my camera. My least favorite tool is email.
I really like Google Docs. Is that super bizarre? I think Google Docs is genius.
Everything in Google Docs.
It's like
I think Google Docs is the most amazing thing in the world.
Actually, that's your question works quite well together with what I wanted to talk about as last point, and that's the festival slogan of Forward Festival. It's called the Odd One Out, and I'm just gonna tell you a little bit what it's about, because you don't see it when you just hear it. And it basically is that we had like really troubles finding like the right slogan this year. For like 5 years festival, it has to be like great and awesome and everything. And after like thousands of hours of brainstorming, we came to this odd point, because we thought that the one thing that's starting to missing somehow when we talk to younger designers or students of design, that they are basically like, oh, have you seen this on Instagram? Have you seen this on Behance? Have you done that? So there's some kind of level that everybody wants to like just reach that level of the guy they saw, and they don't appreciate their own oddness, because like their own point of view on things. And so we said, okay, we're gonna make this motto, and we wanna like encourage people to let the creativity flow freely on the one hand, and on the other side, like really see that it's a gift to be, when you're creative, that you bring this other perspective to things. You're not like the corporate guy who like is all about numbers crushing. You're the guy who shows to them that there can be another way. And so my question would be, if you can relate to that in some way, and in what way you are odd.
I think you brought up something really important, and that is that a lot of people look at other people's work in a way almost to copy it. Not even deliberately, but when you start looking at a lot of work, you cannot help but be influenced by it, right? It's just the way we are. And I think part of the problem, especially in web, why everything looks the same, is because everyone looks at the same stuff for inspiration, you know? It's like they're looking at a website, they want to copy that website, or something like that, they think that's good, and it ends up looking like that. For us, whenever we do anything, we try to not do the opposite. So rather than think of it as a website, we're like, what would it be if it would be a movie poster? What would it be if it would be a book cover? What would it be if it would be a survey? What would be, you know, and we try to get out of the digital sameness space by trying to think of it as a different solution. Just because it happens on the screen doesn't mean it has to look like everything else that happens on the screen. And when we used to have junior designers reporting to us, that was one of the big problems, that, you know, you walk by their computers and you notice that they just look at Dribble all day, or whatever, or Behance, or whatever shit people are looking at, and they hang out there and they post their stuff and they leave comments, and I think now with Instagram it's even more dangerous, because you start to see how people who post their work on Instagram, you know, let's say one image got 900 likes and the other image got 400 likes, you immediately will start to think that the image that got 900 likes is better, so therefore you should make more work or post more things like the image that has 900 likes. So you start to lose your own path, and you start to pretend that, or you start to give the audience what you think the audience wants. And I think that's sad, actually, and I think that's one of the main reasons why Instagram, I think, is a horrible tool in that sense for a lot of young designers who aren't yet strong enough to have their own voice, you know? And also, to be Instagram famous doesn't buy you anything, because at the end of the day, you can have an image that has 10,000 likes, but there's no amount of time, you know, like people look at it for 3 seconds and then they forget about it and it's gone forever, you know? So there's no longevity to it at all. Luckily, we are too old to be influencers, you know. But I worry about that in the younger generations, you know. At what point do you allow yourself to be fully influenced by the crowd and not do the thing that you think is good or that you think matters? So yeah, I think that's true. And if you ask me what's odd about me, there's a lot of things that are very odd about me. I mean, so many things. I think the oddest thing about me is that I grew up in a lesbian commune. That's the oddest thing about me.
I mean, I don't know what's odd about me. And that's something that other people should tell you rather than me telling you what's the odd thing about me. But I think in terms of Instagram, it's like, it's hard to say, or it's hard to answer. It's like yes and no. On one hand, imagine 10 years ago, or no, even more than 20 years ago, if you're a designer or you're an illustrator, you basically had no outlet to even show off your work or your creativity. And today you kind of do. So it's a good thing and a bad thing. Using it to get too inspired or to steal other people's work, of course it's bad. But at least now we have this outlet that if you do something creative, you can show it to the world. And for example, some people we collaborate with, we also did find we knew through Instagram and then through conferences that we're doing a project right now with Heavy 3D, and those are the people that we know personally. We met them personally in life as well. But it's definitely, we're not going to look on Instagram and decide, okay, that's the style we're going to do. And I think it's just a matter, and I think that's not a really Instagram problem, that's a problem, that's your personal problem. That's like how people, even 20 years ago or 30 years ago, if you want to rip off somebody's work, you would look for magazines and books and art books and catalogs and things like that. Today is just on a much bigger scale and easily accessible to absolutely everyone within a millisecond. But I think to Irene's point, is when we start doing work, it's important for us to look at anything. We do look for references, but it's never a digital work. When we do digital work, it can be an art piece, it can be architecture, or it can be something in nature, it can be a photograph, it can be a music or sound. There's always a reference here and there, but it's not, if we're doing a website, we're going to be looking at websites. Like, that's not how it works for us.
Perfect, yeah.
Do you think that designers have a task to fulfill in society? For example, I've been to the Milano Biennale of Design lately, and the motto was broken nature, and how to interact with design for reasons to ameliorate the world, more or less, or the impact of our lifestyle and so on. So what do you think about this?
So whether or not designers have a responsibility?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think now more than ever it's becoming very apparent that for a long time designers did not consider things like the environment or any of that. I mean, think about packaging. It's the most useless, horrible way to pollute the planet, right? And it's the big job for a lot of designers is to make packaging. So yeah, we absolutely have a responsibility in that. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves that design is not necessarily a very positive thing for the world always. It's great to help other companies sell more products, but in a lot of ways it has a very negative impact, especially on the environment. So the question really is, to what extent is that reversible? Is that something that is in the hands of the designers? Is that something that designers even have the power to change? I think if you look at it on a much bigger socio-political scale, obviously the entire economy is built around having everyone constantly buying new things, right? Everything is upgrade, 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 buy something new, buy something new, buy something new. And there's that's what fuels our economy. If we stop doing that and we say, no, use the same phone for 10 years, it's fine, our economy cannot support that. It will be like, ugh, like we will get into a recession because of it. So I think it's not so much do designers have the responsibility, it's we need a completely new economic system that actually allows for us to create products that have a much longer lifespan than whatever new phone or new this or new that or buy mentality that we currently have that is driving the whole world and the whole economy. So it's a big topic, it's a big question, and I think we are getting to the point now where there's like a tipping point, like how much longer can we continue with the society the way it's built today? At what point does it truly become unsustainable? I mean, it already has, but it's definitely, in that sense, I'm quite a pessimist. I don't think we're on the right track at all. I think we're on the wrong track.
No, I agree. I think if you look at every single designer that's doing a work today, you're gonna find that 99% of the projects that are happening today, you can always find a reason why it shouldn't exist. Oh, it's just another thing, it's just another waste of time, it's just another waste of money. There are simpler projects to determine that whether you have your personal responsibility for it. For example, you work for, let's say, a tobacco company or oil companies or alcohol, but those are easy to see the negative impact. But even if you work with a Samsung, a phone manufacturer, you work with Apple, or you work with companies that in our heads are somehow doing good, at the end of the day you can still find 10 reasons why you shouldn't be doing that job, because it's just another waste of time and waste of money. And I think it's just, we as a society and designers, we need to kind of maybe clear things out, or maybe draw the line of like what's actually useful design and what is design for the bad regardless. And it's hard, and I think it's personally for different people it's different, and culturally it's going to be different. I think designers in Indonesia have slightly different values to designers in the US or designers in Brazil, depending on how they were raised or depending what things they had when they were growing up. So I just think it's a bigger question too. And also, if you will find 10 extremely responsible designers who will value and measure all the pros and cons, Philip Morris will find that 11th designer who will still do the job. So it's sometimes it's not even on us, on designers. Sometimes it's on companies that do have money and will go all in to get their stuff done.
Yeah, and just to add one thing to that, I know that you guys know who Kickstarter is, right? They're the company that allows you to raise funds. So we did a project with them, and I never thought much about Kickstarter as a company. I had no opinion about them. And then we worked inside their building with their CEO, who ended up becoming a close friend of ours. And while we were there, he was working super hard in making Kickstarter become a Corp B corporation, which in the United States basically means that you pay more taxes as a company. So you apply to pay more taxes and put restrictions on your environmental output and your employee compensation. And so it comes basically with a whole set of rules that you have to pay your employees a fair amount, you have to give them a pension, you have to give them healthcare, you are not allowed to have a negative impact on the environment. And he was working on this, and I asked him, I said, Yancy, why would you do that voluntarily? You're gonna make your whole company much harder to run. Financially, it's going to be much more difficult for you guys to make a profit. And you have to pay more taxes. What, are you crazy? And he said, well, I have to do it now, because if we become a Corp B now, no matter what happens to me in the future, all of Kickstarter's shareholders will have to abide to those rules. So if Kickstarter is around for 100 years, even after I'm dead, they will still have to abide to the rules of being a Corp B. So it's very important, actually, he said, that all companies go through the effort of doing that. And after talking to him about that, my entire perspective on Kickstarter really changed, and I now have become, whenever people talk shit about Kickstarter, I'm like, wait a minute, let me tell you something. And I think, at least in the US, unfortunately, I know in Europe there's a lot of regulatory ways in which companies have to abide to environmental rules and all of these things. In the US there isn't any. So when you hear of companies who in the US in particular, like Patagonia is another one, is also a court beat, when they go out of their way to do that, it's so impressive to me. And I think we don't celebrate those things enough as a society, that there are companies like that going through all of this legal work and financial hardships in order to minimize their own profits so that they can impact the world in a positive way. They're out there, we just don't talk about them enough.
I feel it's a trend now, like 2019, that more like
Great.
companies now
I wish,
like
yeah.
campaigns.
Yes, but that's like the whitewashing. A lot of brands do that.
I think, unfortunately, mostly it's those companies like Patagonia or Kickstarter. They're still unicorns, and I think what company really want is for media to write about them in a way they write about Kickstarter or Patagonia, but at the same time not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's like just articles and clickbait pop out that this company maybe donated $1 million and then they didn't pay taxes on that. It's like there's always something there. So I wish it would be trend to the point that companies would want to be this way, but in the US it's wild west. It's like no control.
No regulations.
People do whatever they feel like and see what happens.
But I think like this whitewashing, that's not like the nicest act of companies to do, but it's in response to I think a change in the mindset of a lot of people, because when you look back 10 years ago, it was everything like just buy, blah blah blah, go for it, capitalism, everything is great, etc. etc. But nowadays, it's if you stand up for something, that's also cool. Like a lot of people really stand up for things, being it some food issues, being it political issues, whatsoever, and that's totally accepted in their community. Wheresoever 10 years ago, most people would say, "I don't give a shit about your opinion." Now you're proud if you're vegan or if you are political that or that or that. And that's changing, and the customer behavior is changing according to this, and that's, I think, the reason why companies have to whitewash them. So probably that has a positive impact in the long way.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a mindset change, Like now we have this whole thing of the user first, or user in the center, or human first. We should change that to planet first, if because we're part of the planet, we're not just here in some vacuum of whatever. So, and I think to me, obviously us living in the US, but both of us being European, it's shocking to me that China has a stronger environmental policy than the United States does. But at the same time, I'm kind of happy about it, because China is much bigger, has a much bigger population, and will have much more power than the US in the next 10 years. They already do in a way. So if China is going to lead us into environmental policies that are better, or the most progressive, really. I mean, who would have thought, But great, I'm in favor of that. Because the US right now, it's I always joke about it, it's like being at the last days of Rome, the end of Rome. We're witnessing it right now. So for us as Europeans, it's very different. Of course, we look at it very differently.
I think our time is really up.
Yes.
So last question.
Just because it's inspiring that you talk about this, I think it's very important. I observed something in Austria or in Europe that we have very strong laws against polluting the environment. But what I don't understand as a human being, these laws are very strong. But on the other side, we import most products from countries where they don't even know how to write environmental friendly or whatever. So I don't understand that how, why do we pretend, because of these laws, just means that companies won't produce in Austria because it's too expensive or too complicated or whatever, and they will shift their production to somewhere else. So we have a job problem. We have the environmental problem still going on. I don't know why this is not really addressed in politics. Kind of. I mean, I know, but.
Well, I mean, for me, I'm from Holland, and I was very inspired by the students who cut class because of the environment, And there's in Dutch there's a term called spijbelaar, which is the type of person who doesn't go to class. And now there's a new word being introduced in the Dutch language called klimaatspijbelaar, which is climate school cutter. Because the kids were like, you know what, enough is enough. Like, we are the ones inheriting this planet, and what's going on with the next, you guys promised that there would be cuts on gas and all of these things, and we're still, no decisions are being made on the European level, So I do think at some point, hopefully, these kids, I have a lot of faith in them, like the kids in the US who protest against gun violence, it's that generation's responsibility now to make a change, because we fucked up the planet and we're continuing to fuck up the planet, and no one's really making any differences. So hopefully the next generation will look at us and say, well, that's not how we're going to do it when we get to power. It's going to be different. And they might be forced to make changes because the water levels will be too high, there will be too many floods, too many famines, the climate is so extreme right now. I mean, Iran is completely flooded for the past, month. The entire country of Iran is flooded, and it's not even on the news, because who gives a shit? It's just Iran, So for us to say that, you're absolutely right. It's like, how can we pretend to be so hypocritical that we in Europe have these laws, but then we don't care about other countries and we import our goods anyway? Maybe there will be a stop to that. But there has to be some sort of revolution in that sense of the younger generation to say enough is enough. And one other thing I want to add to that, which I think will also be an interesting discussion in Europe now, is privacy laws around data. So there's a lot of very high-level discussions now in the European Union around, as you guys have seen now, you have to say, I agree that there's cookies on this website and all of this stuff, but the fact that companies can extort data from us for free, and we have zero power in that, is also a big problem, because that level of information that big corporations have, like a Facebook or whatever, then influences the politics, that influences Brexit, influences Trump becoming president. So people who want to stay in power and who are benefit financially off of this current system are using our data against us to make it happen. So until that's another source that we have to cut. If we can cut the data abuse, then we can have discussions about reforming society in a way. Because right now, we are all being manipulated based on our own interactions with online media. But that's a very big topic.
You want to say something?
I don't have an answer to your question. I mean, honestly, but the way I think of it is like, okay, if we have policies in Europe and then certain policies about environmental change in Europe, but we do assemble a lot of things and we order a lot of things overseas where they have zero policies there. So it's almost like we're allowed to fuck up their land, but we're not that's absolutely hypocritical, and something needs to be done. But it would have been worse if we wouldn't have any laws here and there wouldn't be any laws there as well. So at least I hope is that it has to start somewhere, and if it starts with Europe or some European countries, and politicians or people who are our age today or a little bit younger who will become politicians in 10 years and 20 years are going to be mindful enough to now and they've been living through having regulations here in Europe for 20, 30 years by then, and they would be mindful enough to kind of maybe have regulations overseas or maybe bring production here. Like I hope that it's a start, and it has to start somewhere, and if it's here in Europe, that's at least better than not having anywhere at all. But I agree, and there is absolutely no 100% guarantee that Europe is going to be mindful about other countries that they are using to build, assemble.
Or labor laws, you know? People
or
kill
use-
themselves
or
to
use
make
other
iPhones
people,
in
yeah.
China, and we don't give a shit. It's like, oh well, people commit suicide for the iPhone that I have in my pocket. You know, nobody cares.
Well, I mean, they solve it by putting nets. So if somebody wants to commit suicide, they die. They don't die, basically. But that's not. It's like fixing a hack. It's like a patch. It's not an actual fix that will help everyone. So, I mean, it is hypocritical, and I don't know an answer whether that's going to level up or that's. But if you want to be an optimist, it's like, okay, at least we have something to start with.
I think that's the nice words to for attempting to.
But I'm still a pessimist that wants to be an optimist. It's like, okay, that's what's odd about me.
Can I ask one more question? Like, who is your favorite client, or is there any like favorite project of yours?
I don't know. You want to start? I'll think while you talk.
Favorite client is us. Favorite projects are the one that we initiate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously over time it would be amazing just to do the stuff that you really, really want to do. That's the goal. It's like when I'm old, I want to spend more time designing what I want to design rather than serving other clients. Or maybe still do both, but because right now the ratio is maybe like 70% or 75%. We're doing client work when people hire us to do something for them. And those are nice clients. We choose clients. We choose clients. We must like them. The project is ambitious or interesting. It's no some stupid shit that nobody needs. Like we have this power now. And then we spend 25% of our time now maybe doing personal projects. And I think over time, I wish this would change. So I would spend 80% time doing my stuff, and then 20% time when something really interesting comes in from a client.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to collaborate.
And your private stuff, is it like you do your stuff and you do yours, or are you also like collaborating?
Well, collaborating too, and like releasing. We've released so far, I think, 4 projects that are self-initiated, that didn't
Like
come
the watch
from,
that we're wearing right now.
Yeah, that didn't come from a client.
So,
So yeah, those would be like our. But when it comes to clients that hire us, I think it's actually it doesn't depend on the company or necessarily what they do. If the client if we like them, if they have a challenging and interesting task, if they are not afraid to risk, because they're clients who are like they don't want to risk at all. Those are our least favorite, and those are usually the clients that we all know. Like every client that has a name, they have something to lose, and they never will risk, and we don't really want to maybe work with them. So those are the clients that they're nice, they're willing to risk, they have a challenging task, they're cool, they want to pay us. We're not doing work for free. Those would be our favorite clients, regardless of a product or regardless of what they're necessarily doing.
I think also client work is, I like client work because sometimes if we only did the work that we want to do, we would end up being quite myopic. And we would only pursue things that are our own interest, you know? What I really like about working on clients, and what I like as a designer who works in client services type of work, is that every year there's 4 projects that we do where we have to enter this industry that I know nothing about, that I've never even thought about before, that I have just never crossed my mind, you know? And then I have to spend 2 months getting really into that world and into that product and into those specifics. And I'm a naturally curious person, so to me it doesn't matter if I have to get into the world of, I don't know, cat food. It's like, oh, I wonder how cat food is made. I have no idea, you know? And then you learn about how cat food is actually made, and every story is interesting. So I like the fact that when we get a new client and it's in an industry that is completely outside of our own interests, that it becomes this like discovery of what is going on in this world, and you realize how many worlds there are that have their own set of rules and their own set of things that they care about and that are important and how they measure success, and it's totally unlike what we care about, but it's still super interesting. And so I think that's where I disagree with Anton. I wouldn't only want to do our own projects, because then I think we would be very boring people, because then we would only pursue our own interests. And that's maybe interesting for 2 years, but the thing that excites me the most as a designer is to really get to work on something that I know nothing about and I've never thought about. And the weirder the client, the more obscure the product, the more complicated the product, or the more complicated the industry, the more I love it, you know? It's like pulling a string and not knowing where the end is, you know? Like, where is this gonna go? And then you unravel this whole world. And I enjoy that probably the most, much more than sitting behind the computer and making layouts.
So then it said you're gonna do all the corporate clients work and you can do the
That might be the solution. Exactly. Yeah, that might be the solution.
So, any further questions? If not, I would end it. We're a bit over time.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.